Hello, so this is my camera review of my Sony, let's see if it says it anywhere on it, a5100. Let's see if we can focus on it. My inferior silver camera's focusing system does not like to focus on it apparently. Okay, so it's a Sony a5100. I've had it for about a year and a half. I bought it in, let's see, December 30th of 2015, used for $350. So I've had it a little while. It had been on the market about a year, I think, when I bought it. This is the kit lens. So why did I buy it? Well, I already had a Sony NEX F3, which was sort of like a first generation mirrorless camera. And this is pretty much the updated consumer model of the other camera I had. So the plan was I was going to sort of, if I ever wanted to shoot something with multiple cameras, these cameras would match because they were pretty much the same camera. This one was just updated. The old one was 16 megapixels, this one is 24. The crazy thing is, this is sort of like the little sister camera to the current Sony APS-C cameras, which is the a6300 and the a6500, which now shoot 4K. This was at the same time as the a6000, so this is basically like a low-rent a6000. Ironically, you can pretty much buy the a5100 and the a6000 for the same price now, and I'll get into that later, because they're essentially the same camera with a few things missing on this camera. So the big thing was, when I was buying this, I was looking at, I knew I wanted to stay with Sony's because I already had one, and I already had sort of the adaptable lenses that I was doing. So this is a Russian Helios lens with an adapter. This is actually a 70-200 Canon FD lens with an adapter. This is actually really cool. I use this a lot for stills. So when I bought this camera, it was either this camera or it was going to be the a6000. That was kind of my budget. That was kind of what I was aiming at, because I'm not ready for like a cinematography style camera. I'm not sort of that intense, but I'm getting better, and I'm getting more comfortable using sort of the tools for filmmaking. Side bonus for this camera, and less so for the Sony NEX that I had, which was the 24 megapixel sensor takes great stills, like crazy good stills. I don't know if you can even see 24 megapixels, but crazy good stills. And even to this day, all the sort of the newer big sister cameras to this, the 6000, 6500, 6300, it's still a 24 megapixel sensor. So they keep updating the sensor and putting new gear in it, but it's the same resolution, and the resolution is astounding. And like Panasonic hasn't caught up yet. I think they're only up to like 20 or 22. Canon, I think, is finally catching up. Nikon uses the same sensor as Sony, so they've been caught up for a while. But like, pretty astounding that you're getting 24 megapixel sensor, because it's, look how small this camera is. You take this little tiny kit lens off, and there's a pretty good sized sensor in there. So it was sort of this or the a6000. The thing that I wanted was, I wanted to flip out screen. This also has a touch screen, but I've turned it off. But for people who want to take, let me take the ISO down. So people who want to take stills. Oh, what am I saying? Oh yeah, so people who want to take stills probably want the viewfinder, which is what the a6000 has, but then you can't flip up the screen. I wanted the pop-up selfie screen. That's what I was really interested in. And this was the only Sony that does it anymore, except for the fixed lens Sonys, because they put the viewfinder right there and it gets in the way. So all the the A7s, the A6000 series cameras all have a viewfinder which allows the screen to pop up but not actually like flip all the way out. For my money now, because the a6000 is the same price and it's a little bit beefier of a camera, I probably would have got the a6000 and just sucked it up, and not being able to see myself, because it has a viewfinder and a hot shoe and sort of all these things that this camera just doesn't. But again, like this camera, I thought this was going to be my dedicated video camera, but as it turns out, the overheating is just a Sony, and it's a big sensor, and this thing overheats like crazy. I took off the sticker, but there's also, if you see the white underneath, that's heat sink material, and still, like, it gives me more time now, and I don't recommend tearing into your camera to do this necessarily, but it really worked for my other Sony camera, my NEX F3, but for this camera, for whatever reason, it just didn't help that much. So, you know, I used to get 12 minutes maybe out of continuous filming. Maybe I get 14 or 15 on a cool outside day. Maybe I'll get to the 30 minutes. It does have the software update that you can unlock the 30-minute limit, so you can record like a video camera as long as you want. But it's going to overheat before you get there, so it doesn't really matter. Let's see what else. So the big problem is it overheats, which is a real bummer, because that was sort of why I wanted this as a video camera. You know, I wanted to sort of step up from my other Sony camera. This thing still only shoots 1080 HD, but you know, for my purposes, there was no reason for me to buy a 4K camera. Even now, like, the a5100 is such not an interest to me, because it's basically this camera with a nice viewfinder that overheats, that shoots 4K. So I'm getting the same thing. The a6500 is supposed to be better in a few different ways, but it still seems to overheat like crazy. So it's just not appealing to me. Once again, it's got Sony menus. These menus I'm getting good at, because it's a lot of like hunting horizontally now, but still like crazy. And the real bummer that this camera has, that my silver camera, my older camera, doesn't have, is you can only program a couple of these buttons down here. Like, I've programmed the question mark button to zoom focus, so I can check focus in sort of a cinematographer kind of way. But you know, like the silver camera, you just push this middle button here, and you can bring up a whole list of menus. It doesn't do anything now, so what a, you know, kind of a waste. Again, this camera, even this kit lens, which I like very much, this camera is very small, physically small. Like, again, I don't have big hands, but I am much too big for this camera. Most of the time when I'm shooting stills, I'm using my thumb on the shutter, because that's more comfortable, especially with like a heavy lens. So it's a, you know, it's a sort of a workaround, but again, it's a pretty decent sized screen for the size camera. But you don't have a viewfinder, so you just have to trust the screen, and in light, you know, like in daylight, it's really hard to see the screen. So it's kind of a, you know, it's sort of the update of the selfie, like, entry-level camera, but there's a few things that are just kind of a bummer about it. I gotta say though, the image quality and the fact that you can put on a bunch of different lenses, awesome. So so yeah, so the image quality is crazy. This is sort of, I'll show you the setup that I usually do when I'm taking stills. I always keep the kit lens on it just in case, because it has autofocus and stabilization, and you never know. It's really great for video, but if I'm taking portraits, I'll usually do this old Canon 70-200 push-pull lens, which is really cool. I think I got this for like 80 or 100 bucks. It's an f4, but again, this camera is so light sensitive that as far as light goes, f4 is not a big deal, and it goes all the way to 210. And if you know, sort of do the math, that's like 340 or something. It's like a crazy reach. So that's really cool. I've been, you know, I had a phase where I was really nerding out on sort of portrait lenses and all that kind of stuff. Again, this is my Canon FD Rokinon 28mm. I think it's a macro, but that's a really fun walk-around lens because it's kind of a good length. And then I have this guy, which is my sort of like my favorite portrait lens, without question, which is my adapted Helios 442 Russian lens. And the really cool thing about that is, because of how the aperture is set up, you have a smooth aperture. It's because of how they sort of did it. So it does click. I don't know if I can do it because it's sort of old and stuck, but yeah, see, it clicks a little bit. But yeah, it has this sort of ring that lets you unlock the aperture and sort of slide the aperture how you want to, which is really cool. It's very nose heavy, by the way. This little tiny lens weighs almost as much as this huge lens. It's very nose heavy, but it's awesome. And particularly like old vintage lenses, they have hard stops and they have these sort of super long focus throws. Some of them do. Like this one has. So you start. So there's the top. My thumb is where we're starting. So like a 280-degree focus throw. So like from here all the way to here. It's crazy. Big fan. If you have never, if you're into sort of adapting lenses for Panasonic or Sony, you can't go worse than a Helios 442. They look so cool. They're bright. They're f2. They're just like, they're astounding little lenses, and they're super cheap and they're everywhere because they were just on, you know, old Russian rangefinder cameras for like 30, 40 years. Try to find a decent one. This one is in terrible shape and it's awesome. Yeah, they're really cool. Getting back to the camera though, so this camera offers some really weird things. It's sort of like a weird marketplace kind of camera because it has the tech of a really high-end Sony stills camera, which means it's sort of like a medium-level video camera. It has histograms and zebras. I don't know if you can see zebras on there. My other camera does not have zebras, and it always surprises me when I pick up that other camera and go, where did my zebras go? Zebras are great for motion picture exposure checking, as are histograms. They don't have false color, which is the other sort of high-end thing, but I'm pretty astounded. It has focus peaking, which I think you can see on here. If I can get it in focus, yeah, so you have yellow peaking going, if you can see that. It has the zoom feature, which you can program. So there's zoom to check focus. It actually doubles, I think. It has movie mode, which I kind of like, but I don't, because a lot of cameras, let me see if I can find it. Hold on. So a lot of cameras have just a movie button. By the way, this movie button sucks. It's in such a weird place and it has like a lip on it, so it's really hard to push. It's really hard to get going. But there's this camera has a dedicated movie mode, which I'm not sure if the A6000 does or not, but I usually keep it in manual. The advantage of going into movie mode is it gives you basically the same menus again: program, auto, shutter, aperture, and then manual, but it gives you the crop, because I believe, I'm not sure, I think Sony's crop in a little bit. I know Panasonic's do. So in stills version, it's a different, you're cropped further out. So this lens is this size in movie version, but if you go to manual version, I guess it's smaller. I don't actually see a whole lot of difference, if I'm being honest. Yeah, you know what, it does crop in. So you have to sort of account for that. So even though it's an APS-C sensor, which is very close to a Cinema Super 35 sensor, so if you're a fan of directors and they're talking about lenses, you think you're doing the math right, but again, this thing crops in, so the math gets screwed up. One thing this camera has that's super cool, and you can do it in movie mode. I can't do it. It exists on my other silver camera, my worst camera, but you can't use it. Is because this camera has a zoom rocker. You can use it for zoom, but you can also use it for clear image zoom. So if you, let's see if I can find it real quick. Zoom settings, clear image zoom. Yeah. So this is an optical zoom lens because it's a power zoom. So it'll zoom in, zoom out. Here, give you sort of perspective. It'll zoom in, it'll zoom out, but once you get past the limit of 50 millimeters, you can also zoom in further, all the way to 2 times. So this 50 millimeter now becomes 100 millimeter on a 1.5 crop. So now you have a kit lens that's capable of 150 millimeters. That's a really long zoom. The really cool thing is you can do these, and oh, here's the thing. So HD video, it's either 4 or 8 megapixels, I forget what it is, but it's not 24 megapixels, so you're not using the whole sensor in the way you think you are. So clear image zoom at least to my eye, is sort of a negligible add-on, whereas if you're using the whole sensor and you use clear image zoom, the image quality will get worse when you zoom in, which is what happens when you're editing and stuff, and you do a zoom on editing, the image quality gets worse. To my eye, I don't see much of a loss of quality. So, but here's the cool thing. So you pop on a you pop on a 50mm Helios that is a fixed lens, so it's not zoomable, and you grab focus. This may have been a grave mistake. Yeah, so you do that. So here, you're not going to be able to see anything. This is a bummer. It's too long and it's too far away. Anyway, you can zoom in digitally while you're doing it, which is really awesome. I should have planned that better. That was just me being stupid. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, so as a filmmaker, kind of a cool camera. The big thing is you gotta plan for the overheating. So you can't rely on this camera for long takes. For short sort of like filmmaking tapes where takes where there's setups and takedowns in sort of a traditional way, you're probably gonna be okay unless it's a hot day. But if you're like filming a recital or a documentary or something where you need to roll for a long time, this camera is gonna overheat, and then once it starts overheating, it's just gonna keep overheating. I've tried everything. Ice packs work really well if you wrap them in cloth so they don't get the camera wet, but you know, if it was a bigger camera, it wouldn't overheat. And for me, a small camera that overheats is not as good as a bigger camera that doesn't overheat. All things being equal. Also, it doesn't have an audio jack. Has a memory card door on the side, which is cool because then you can get to the memory card easy. And there's HDMI. Battery in the bottom. These batteries burn out real quick, so you go through a lot of batteries. No audio jack, no hot shoe, has a flash, but it's pretty much useless. So, and it doesn't have a viewfinder, so sort of all the things you expect from a camera it doesn't have. So I gotta say though, the audio from this stereo mic, if you can see the two holes on top, it's a stereo mic, is really decent, but you have to be very close to the camera. So if you're doing sort of a selfie vlog, it's almost doable, but it's kind of not perfect. But I have a little audio recorder. Let me see if I have it in front of me. I don't. I have a little $100 audio recorder that I just record audio separately and clap every single time, no matter what. So if you're doing this for video, probably either record audio on your phone or use an audio recorder, because the sound off of this is not going to get any better than what it already is, and it's not very good. This thing also has a phone app. You can control the app from the phone, but it's super laggy and it's not very good, and you really can't do anything with it. GoPro has it for theirs, and it's so much better. So it's pretty much not usable. I guess if I couldn't flip the screen around and I wanted to see the frame, I could use the app, but that's about it. Let's see what else. The form factor again is not very good, but for what it is, it's like, and this kit lens is great. There's a reason why Sony just hasn't changed this kit lens for their new cameras. It's the same kit lens. It's really good. The autofocus is quite fast, although I have it in manual, and it's tiny. Like, it folds into nothing, and it has a zoom rocker. So if you have a camera that doesn't have the zoom rocker up here, you can still use it. So I can use it on my worst camera, and it'll still zoom. It's just like it's sort of a sweetheart of a lens. It's not great, but it's really good at sort of just being itself. So, you know, for my money, this is such a cheap camera that it's like, I don't know why you wouldn't buy it. But again, I have my silver NEX camera that is pretty much has no value. Like, you could pay a couple $100 and get one now. Is it worth paying twice that for this camera? If you're taking stills, absolutely. But if you're taking stills, go ahead and get the A6000 and don't bother with the flip-up screen. Again, this thing has a touch screen, but I don't use it. The sort of touch to zoom thing that you can do on your phone works pretty good, or touch to focus, I mean. But you know, it's not super great, and most Sony cameras don't have a touch screen. But honestly, you know, for like a tiny camera that you're only using it for this works really well. Again, it's tiny, so you know you need to be a tiny person to really feel good about it in your hands, but it's really decent. But otherwise, the a6000 is there. If you have considerably more money, the a6300 is pretty much the a6000, except it does 4K. And if you're very wealthy, the a6500 has image stabilization in the body. That sort of situation becomes a conversation on whether or not you want to get a Panasonic, because you're pretty much getting a better kit out of the Panasonic almost every single time. But you know, like, this camera is great. I honestly, this is my stills camera. I shoot video when I know I have sort of control. So if I'm on set and this is the camera we're using, then I'll shoot video. But otherwise, I'll use my silver camera, which I know I can rely on a lot more, and it's not going to overheat as quickly. But the stills on this are just crazy, especially in RAW. Just outstanding. So definitely not for the faint of heart. The menu systems in my silver camera are a lot better than this one. The menu systems in this are just tough, just real tough. They have face tracking, which is great in the autofocus mode, but they also have smooth skin smoothing, or smooth skin effect. I forget what it's called, but it's awful. You look waxy. You look like you way retouched yourself with a really bad Instagram retouch. So yeah, you know, it's a decent camera. You know, now that I know what I know, I should have got the a6000 and just dealt with the fact that I can't do this, but it is what it is. It's, you know, this sensor, this camera body is terrible. It's too small and it overheats, and it's bad news. Having said that, this sensor is amazing and great, and you know, very useful. And this camera happens to have, as do the rest of these, have some real pro features on it for shooting movies. It's never going to replace a true cinematography camera, and it's really sort of falling behind in dealing with Panasonics and Olympuses, kind of, because they don't overheat. But if this thing, you know, fixes its overheating situation, this is like a bulletproof camera. I talked a lot, wish I had a viewfinder, but it's a fun little light camera that overheats. Bye.